Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolbarger and welcome to our Middle East update for the week of September 14th up here in Hayden Lake, Idaho. Fall is definitely in the air. I want to encourage you first and foremost to go to our website, holygroundexplorations.com. You'll want to get the PDF PowerPoint presentation for this week's YouTube Middle East update because, as usual, we won't have enough time to cover everything. We have a new tour that's coming up that I want to highlight to Israel. It's February 11th through March 2nd. And let me be quick to say it's not a tour. It's what we call our Selah School of Discipleship. Sharon and I, we rent vans. It's limited to 12 people. And again, it gives you the opportunity to make your way through the land at a slower pace, sort of marinate in a lot of the places, give you a variety of experience. So this is not the tour bus and the five-star hotel. This is more of a school of discipleship. And again, our website, we have brochures. We've sold this out the last 2 years that we've done it, so check it out. Let's jump right in to our headlines for this week. Well, the fact is that American support for the nuclear deal between the six world powers and the U.S. and Iran, the reality is that the support for this has dropped to an incredible 21%, which obviously stains the Obama administration, what they would hope to be sort of their crowning foreign policy achievement in his second term, kind of his legacy. But the reality is that the Senate has blocked the ability for the House of Representatives to really do anything about this. So in a sense, game over. But as I said before, maybe small battle over, large battle yet to come, which we'll talk about. It's a sad statement. We'll get into more details here in a minute. Iran, in the midst of all this, their leader, the Ayatollah, once again has promised the destruction of Israel, the Jewish state. He stated that Israel would not see the next 25 years. Hillary is arguing that the U.S. must be clear-eyed, as she puts it, about the nuclear deal with Iran, stressing that Obama's landmark agreement must be enforced with, quote, vigor and vigilance. It's not a step towards normalizing relations with America's longtime enemy. This is going to be one of those political hot potatoes that are going to bounce back and forth, obviously. The former Israeli defense minister, his comments on this deal, quote, very simply, there will be bloodshed, but Israel is strong. On a different subject, Putin has offered, Russia that is, has offered to shield and develop Israel's gas fields. It's interesting, the buildup in Russia and Syria, so we're going to have to keep our eyes on what that means. And then finally, when things seem to settle down, there's always the Temple Mount that can be stirred up and cause rioting and hatred once again to spill over. Hamas, their quotes, Israeli actions on the Temple Mount are a declaration of war. And as violence spills over now, this is the third day, Islamic groups are calling upon the world to rein in Israel before the whole situation explodes. And so, once again, it doesn't take much whatsoever. It's an illusion, but when things settle down, all Hamas or Fatah or the PA or whatever group, All they have to do is declare that Israel is messing with the Temple Mount, and once again we have violence. Question mark, does Obama win in this deal? As the Senate has blocked the vote, as I've mentioned, all but assuring this Iran nuclear deal to be upheld, the Republicans are threatening to take legal action against Obama, calling for a revolt. Bottom line, and this came from the House floor, what part of death to America do you not understand? The Iranian deal is a bad deal, and it needs to be stopped, and we are fighting here in the House of Representatives to do that. As I've mentioned, the deal survived a key Senate vote. To me, it's sackcloth and ashes time. As I've mentioned, and we'll get to this, the small battle has been lost, but we must keep our eyes open because this is not finished yet. Now, beginning next week, Obama will be free to start scaling back the U.S. sanctions to implement the agreement that's been negotiated with Iran, the U.S., and the 5 other world powers. The accord aims to constrain the nuclear ambition of Iran in exchange for over $150 billion of relief in international sanctions. And again, here's the quote. This vote is a vote for diplomacy, for American national security and security in the world, according to Obama. Going forward, we will turn to the critical work of implementing and verifying this deal so that Iran cannot pursue a nuclear weapon. And I simply am sighing and shaking my head and asking the question, are we really that stupid? And unfortunately, I think the answer is in the affirmative. We have bowed down and we have yielded, and it's rhetoric. There's not going to be any peace whatsoever. Once again, what part of death to America, and we will wipe out Israel within the next 25 years, do we not understand? Well, as I've mentioned, the next battle, I said the small battle's over, but we've got a larger one that's coming. Palestinian Authority President Abbas, he welcomed the UN decision that authorized the Palestinians to be able to raise their flag at its headquarters in the UN in New York, alongside of the Vatican flag. Abbas praised the 119 countries who supported the gesture, saying that they were on the side of truth and justice. The official Palestinian news agency Wafa reported. And again, there's 2 battles that are coming. This one in particular is the battle for Jerusalem. And here's the quote. It's not going to be enough to just have the Palestinian flag raised in the UN, but it goes on to say the struggle will continue until the Palestinian flag flies over the eternal capital of occupied Jerusalem. The Palestinians aspire to make East Jerusalem the capital of a future Palestinian state, while Israel claims that sovereignty, complete sovereignty over the entire nation. So once again, it is going to be all about Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be and is a cup of trembling, that is, for the entire world. So we must keep our eyes, and if you want to zero in, it's going to be the Temple Mount. Once again, I alluded that the flag is now going to fly. The Palestinian flag will fly at the UN. It was an overwhelming vote, 119-8, with 45 abstentions. Israel being one of the countries, of course, that abstained. The Israeli UN envoy slams the move, saying that the UN Assembly would declare the earth flat if the PA proposed it. A friend of mine has a newsletter simply said they refer to the UN with a lot of different phrases. He calls them the ugly nothings, but he says the ugly nothings made the fake and terror-infested nation, that's the Palestinian Authority, as holy as the Pope. Only 7 countries voted with Israel against this anti-Semitic international hypocrisy. And so once again, those 2 flags that are not members of the UN will be flying together, that being the Palestinian flag right next to the flag of the Vatican. Now, as I mentioned, not enough time to cover everything. There's an article here I want you to read that talks about America needs to be prepared for ISIS in our homeland. Talk a little bit about the day after the deal. I said there are 2 upcoming battles that are coming. The battle for Jerusalem. And I want you to understand that just because we've agreed to this nuclear deal, you have to understand that Israel has not agreed, and that Israel will act, and I think it will be in a military way. So we must keep our eyes open. An article that just came out, it's called The Day After the Deal. Now that the nuclear deal with Iran appears to have jumped the congressional hurdle that clears its way now for implementation, lawmakers and policy analysts alike are looking at the day after. Not surprisingly, many are calling for legislation committed to boosting Israel's security and perhaps aiming the Jewish state to carry out airstrikes against complicated Iranian targets. Former Ambassador Dennis Ross and Director of Washington Institute Near East Policy David McCloskey called for legislation providing Israel with these massive penetrating bunker buster bombs. We're hearing about a meeting with Obama and Netanyahu in November. We're hearing about how America, even though we've agreed to allow Iran to go down this nuclear path, that we are going to, in a sense, support and give even more military aid to Israel. Once again, as I said before, the reality is that we've lost the one battle, but there's a larger one that's coming. I want you to make sure that you read the article that's called "Has Anybody Read the Fine Print?" It's very embarrassing as a country to realize that apparently no one has. I mean, it is so ridiculous that we're allowing the Iranians to, in a sense, watch over and police themselves. They're the ones that will collect the soil samples to give to the IAEA. This is all part of that fine print, so make sure you take the time to check that out. And a couple more. The unifying factor, like I said, there's so many different groups of jihadist, Muslim, Islamists, that the only thing that seems to unify them is killing or destroying Israel. There were representatives from a number of Palestinian terrorist groups that met in Beirut in order to work out a joint strategy to continue fighting Israel. The groups included Hamas, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Fatah, the Palestinian Liberation Front, and the Revolutionary Palestinian Communist Party. The meeting focused on fighting Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, the Judification of Jerusalem, and plans that will permit keeping Jews off the Temple Mount, and once again, anything that can bring these groups together will center in on the destruction of Israel. And so that is the unifying factor. And then the last thing, before I get to the last thing, I want you to know that there's another article in the PDF that I just don't have time to go over that's entitled The Jewish Responses to Anti-Semitism. Make sure you take that in. But Amazon, you'll see the pictures. That's another reason why you need to get the PDFs, because with every article there's photos that go along with it. And once again, this has to do with the rise of anti-Semitism in our day. Amazon, to their credit, pulled the following phone cases. After an outcry, Amazon pulls the items that featured blood-stained Israeli flags for cases, mobile phone cases, iPad cases, umbrella, shower curtains, and doormats. And you can see these pictures. Many Amazon customers expressed their outrage on the website, describing the items as portraying pure anti-Semitism. But you might as well brace yourself, folks, because this is going to come in spades. It's continuing to grow. And as Christians, as believers in Yeshua, we must take the stand. We must choose to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for Jewish eyes to be open that they might receive their Messiah, as well as praying that the prison doors of Islam would be broken open by the one who came to save the lost and to open the eyes of the blind. So let's be in prayer. It is our weapon of choice these days. Also, there's a second YouTube this week as we're in the midst or the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. Make sure you check that out. I believe that this is a holiday that is important for Christians to understand and to plug ourselves into. There's much to be learned, snapshots, glimpses of Jesus and the fulfillment as we go from the Feast of Trumpets through the 10 days of awe to, of course, Yom Kippur, and then in a week or so we have the Feast of Tabernacles. So, as my Jewish friends will say, Shana Tova, and I wish you God Shalom, and let's be warriors. Let's be young lions that are roaring in this day. Shalom.